It begins in a still, narrow alleyway just before dawn, the air heavy with frost, and the sound of nothing but a faint, brittle crackle from an old loudspeaker high on a crooked pole. The voice spilling from it is flat and insistent, repeating praises for the supreme leader, in tones that sound less like celebration and more like a ritual chant performed for an unseen god. The buildings on either side lean toward one another as if eavesdropping, their faded paint flaking away under the long grip of winter. Not a footstep echoes, not a door creaks. The whole city seems to be holding its breath, as if even the walls know better than to disturb this hour. You may have heard fragments of stories from this place before. Whispers about defectors slipping across rivers turned solid with ice, about mothers scraping bark from trees to keep children alive through the coldest months, about streets where silence is so constant it feels like a living thing that follows you. But the real North Korea is more than secrecy or isolation. It is a blueprint of fear laid brick by brick into every streetlight, woven line by line into every schoolbook, slipped like a shadow into every glance between neighbors. It is not simply a hidden nation. It is a machine designed to measure loyalty, in bloodlines, to punish faith as if it were treason, and to carve obedience into the bones of children who have not yet learned the full meaning of the songs they are forced to sing at morning assemblies. If you are listening now in the quiet of your own home, perhaps under the dim glow of a lamp, or lying back in the safety of your bed, I ask you, where are you listening from? And what would you miss most if freedom vanished overnight without a sound? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine living where truth itself is considered contraband, where silence is the only language that will not bring punishment to your door. Here, the regime does not need you to protest to consider you a threat. It does not require you to act, to speak, or even to think in ways that defy its will. Your existence alone, if born into the wrong family, if you hum the wrong melody under your breath, or if you hold a forbidden belief in the most private corner of your mind, is enough to put you on the path toward disappearance. In this place, crime is not a clear line you cross. It is a shifting shadow that moves depending on ideology, suspicion, or the convenience of those in power. A neighbor overhearing a half-joking remark, a radio signal caught by accident, a prayer whispered for too long in the wrong company. Here, these are not simple mistakes. They are evidence. You do not inherit rights here. You inherit classification. Since the 1950s, the regime's Songbun system has sorted every citizen into layers of trust or suspicion, based not on merit, but on perceived loyalty to the state. Your grandfather's supposed error, whether proven or fabricated, becomes a weight on your shoulders. A cousin's escape across a border, a sibling's thoughtless comment at work, even a distant friend's unverified connection to someone overseas, each can stain your record forever. This invisible mark determines if you will live in Pyongyang, among the privileged, or be sent to work a lifetime in the fields of a collective farm. It decides whether you will be fed enough to live without constant hunger, or survive on scraps. It is not what you do that shapes your fate here, but the blood in your veins, the names in your family, and the absence, or the excess, of silence around you. Religion is not considered a private matter. It is treated as a betrayal of the soul. Possessing a Bible is enough to earn a sentence to a political prison camp. Holding secret worship at home, even among your children, is seen as an act of rebellion against the state. From their earliest days, children are taught to report not on strangers, but on their parents. Loyalty belongs not to family, not to truth, not even to one's conscience. It belongs solely to the leader. Thought control starts in early childhood and is reinforced through self-criticism sessions, synchronized school chants, and textbooks in which the only heroes worth remembering are the ruling bloodline. Questioning the official story is not simply dissent. Here it is criminal intent. And intent in this system does not have to be proven. It only has to be perceived. The result is a society where everyone is both prisoner and warden, where conversations drop into whispers at the sound of approaching footsteps, where holding someone's gaze for a moment too long might spark suspicion, where songs from abroad are dangerous enough to get you noticed by the wrong person. Books from outside are sometimes copied by hand in the dark, page by page, the paper hidden between floorboards. Silence, once a refuge, becomes exhausting because you must carry it at all times, even when you are alone. You learn to bury your real thoughts so deep that eventually you cannot remember where you put them. The only safe opinion is the one handed to you by the state, and even then, if you repeat it in the wrong tone or at the wrong moment, it can become suspect. Here, control is not simply about obedience. It is about uncertainty, about keeping every person in a constant state of suspended fear where survival depends on being invisible. In North Korea, guilt does not have to be proven. It is assumed, and innocence is meaningless. Then one day, perhaps in the middle of a gray morning, when the streets are dust-blown and ordinary, the rhythm of your life shatters. There is no knock at the door to prepare you, no official summons giving you a moment to gather your thoughts. You might be walking along a familiar lane on your way to fetch water or sitting at home sipping weak tea. Without warning, a presence looms beside you. A firm hand grips your arm, and the air seems to grow colder. There is no warrant shown, no explanation offered. Only the quiet, swift, undeniable action of someone taking you away. Your heart begins to pound in a way that makes your chest ache. A rough cloth is pressed against your face, cutting off the light. The world goes black. Losing your sight in that moment sharpens every other sense. The sudden harshness of the hand on your arm, the uneven sound of footsteps on dirt, the faint smell of dust and iron. You are led forward into a space you cannot see, your body tensing as your mind tries desperately to map each movement. You are pushed into a vehicle. You think it might be a truck, its floor gritty beneath your shoes, the air inside heavy with stale breath and metal. The journey is disorienting. You feel every twist and turn, every bump in the road, but have no sense of direction. Time stretches and collapses, minutes blending into hours until you no longer know how long you've been moving. In that darkness, you feel yourself separating from everything you have ever known. Your name, your street, the voices of the people you love, all fading into something distant and unreachable. Somewhere along this path, you understand, with sudden clarity. Here, a life can vanish without a sound, and you are already halfway to becoming one of its missing voices. When the truck finally stops, you don't know if it's day or night. The blindfold has turned time into something without edges, and your sense of place has been peeled away like a second skin. The door opens with a metallic groan, and cold air floods in, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and something, faintly metallic, like old blood or rusted iron. Rough hands grip your arms again, pulling you out into an unfamiliar silence. You hear the soft scrape of gravel under boots, the distant, hollow clang of a gate swinging shut somewhere ahead. You are led forward, the blindfold still in place, each step feeling both too long and too short, as if the ground itself is uncertain. Beneath you, then the air changes, thicker now, warmer, as if you've been swallowed by a building with no windows. A door slams behind you. The blindfold comes off, and you are in a cell so small that the walls seem to lean inward, closing. Around you, the light is dim, the air stale and humid. Your eyes adjust slowly to the space. A bare floor of stained concrete, walls streaked with moisture, and in one corner, a bucket whose smell leaves no doubt of its use. The chill from the walls seeps into you, and it's not the kind of cold. You can escape by rubbing your arms or stamping your feet. It sinks into your bones, patient and thorough. You stand there, unsure if you should sit or remain on your feet, unsure if any movement will be seen as defiance. Hours pass, or perhaps only minutes. There is no way to tell. Then comes the first interrogation. They take you to another room, barely larger than the cell but brighter, with a single naked bulb hanging overhead. Its light is too harsh, revealing every crack in the walls, every shadow under your eyes. The questions begin. They are not questions in the way you once understood them. These are demands in the form of accusations, repeated over and over, shifting, in phrasing, but never in meaning. Who do you work for? What did you say? Who else was there? Who helped you? You answer truthfully, but it makes no difference. They are not seeking truth, only submission. The same questions return the next day, and the next, sometimes whispered in your ear, shouted inches from your face. They ask about people you know, about things you've never done, about thoughts you've never had. The pattern is relentless, not to uncover facts, but to erode the boundaries inside your mind until you can no longer be sure where truth ends and memory begins. Physical pain becomes part of the rhythm. Some days, you are forced to kneel for hours on end, your legs numbing until they feel like they belong to someone else. Other days, your arms are bound tightly behind your back in ways that stretch your shoulders until they burn, each breath sharp and shallow. Sometimes the pain is sudden, a slap, a kick, a shove that sends you sprawling. And sometimes it is a slow, grinding ache designed to seep into you until it feels permanent. The guards speak little. When they do, their voices carry no emotion, as if they've been trained to strip their words of anything human. At night, back in the cell, sleep is no refuge. You dream of open doors that vanish when you reach them, of voices calling your name from somewhere you can't find, of the sound of water dripping endlessly in the dark. You wake to find your body stiff, your mouth dry, your thoughts still, tangled in the dream's knots. Days lose their shape. Without clocks, without sunlight, without the familiar markers of life outside, you cannot tell one from another. Hunger gnaws at you constantly, a slow, steady force that makes your hands tremble and your stomach cramp. The food, when it comes, is barely edible. A handful of rice that tastes faintly of dust, a slice of bread gone stale before it reached you, a thin soup whose color suggests nothing of what it might contain. You eat it all because there is no choice. You chew slowly, not to savor it, but to make it last longer, pretending for a moment that you are not counting each grain. The worst part is the uncertainty. You are not told what you are accused of, or what will happen next. You are not told how long you will be kept here, or if you will ever leave. You are not told if anyone outside even knows where you are. That uncertainty is a blade sharper than any knife, because it cuts into every thought you have, leaving nothing untouched. It changes you. You begin to measure time in the sounds you hear through the walls. The scrape of a door being opened. Somewhere far away, the sudden echo of footsteps that draw closer and then fade, the occasional muffled cry that lasts only a few seconds before being swallowed by silence again. You try not to wonder who made that sound, or what happened to them afterward. One day, they take you from your cell without explanation. You are blindfolded again, led down a corridor whose floor feels uneven underfoot, then outside into the cold. The air smells sharper here, cleaner, but also emptier. You are pushed into another vehicle. This time the journey is longer, the road rougher. Your body sways with each bump, your shoulders brushing against unseen metal walls. You try to count the turns, the stops, anything to give you a sense of direction, but the motion is too unpredictable. Eventually, the vehicle slows, stops. You are let out, and the first sound you hear is a gate creaking open. its hinges complaining in the cold air. The ground beneath your feet is packed dirt, and there is a smell in the air now, smoke, damp, wood, and something else, something like rotting grain. When the blindfold comes off, you see a fence stretching in both directions, topped with rusted coils of barbed wire that catch the weak light. Beyond it, low buildings crouch like animals waiting to pounce, their roofs sagging under years of neglect. This is not a place people visit. It is a place people are brought to and left in. You have entered the camps. Here, you will come to. Learn there are two kinds of zones. The first are total control zones, a phrase that sounds clinical until you understand its meaning. These are the places from which no one ever returns. Once you are sent here, your life is no longer measured in years, but in the number of days you can survive. There is no sentence to serve, no release date to hope for. You work until you cannot, and then you fade. The second kind are revolutionary zones, where a faint, distant possibility of release exists. But it is a possibility in name only, a tool used to squeeze more obedience from those inside. Conditions in both are brutal. Labor begins before the sun rises and ends only when it is too dark to see. Hunger is constant, the kind that makes your vision blur when you stand too quickly. Punishments are swift and often arbitrary. A glance held too long, a step taken out of turn, a task done too slowly. And here, perhaps the cruelest rule of all reveals itself. Your punishment is not yours alone. In these camps, the sins of one are visited upon the many. Parents, children, siblings, cousins, even those who did not know what you are accused of, can be brought here to share your fate. You understand, in a single sickening moment, that by being here, you may have doomed people you love. This knowledge becomes another weight to carry, heavier than the cold or the hunger. The gate closes behind you with a sound that echoes in your chest, and you know that whatever life you had before is not just far away. It has been erased. The first morning in the camp begins not with the soft breaking of dawn, but with a barked command and the dull thud of boots on packed earth outside the barracks. The air inside is so heavy and stale that it feels like you have been breathing the same breath as everyone else for hours. You sleep, if you can call it sleep, on a rough wooden platform. Nothing but a thin, warm mat between you and the splintered boards. At some point during the night, you felt the crawling of unseen insects across your skin, but brushing them away did little. They always returned. You wake already sore, your mouth dry, your stomach knotted with hunger. The smell of the room is layered. Damp earth from the floor, unwashed bodies, the faint acid tang of sweat soaked into fabric that hasn't been cleaned in months. The guards come in without ceremony, ordering everyone to stand. There is no time for hesitation. Outside, the cold hits immediately, sliding under the thin shirt you wear, gripping your bones. In the yard, prisoners gather in lines, heads down, eyes fixed on the ground. This is not out of shame, but survival. Eye contact here can be read as defiance. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is handed out, a scoop of rice that is grayish, sometimes mixed with dirt, or a chunk of bread that crumbles to dust in your mouth. On rare days, there might be a sliver of vegetable floating in watery soup, but those days feel like rumors more than reality. You learn quickly to eat every grain, every crumb, because there is no telling when the next meal will come, or if it will be any better. Your body is already weakened from the journey here, but now labor begins. There is no easing in, no period of adjustment. You are sent out to work in frozen fields, the ground so hard it resists every strike of the hoe. Often, there are no tools at all, only bare hands digging into the cold, clawing at roots, lifting stones heavy enough to make your back ache for days. The work is not simply hard, it is endless. There is no goal, no finish line. You work until the guards say stop, which could be hours after darkness has fallen. Muscles strain, fingers split open and bleed, and shoulders burn until they feel like they might come apart. And always, there is the knowledge that if you falter, if you pause too long to catch your breath, you invite a blow from a guard's stick or the sharp sting of a whip across your back. Hunger follows you like a shadow. It is not the kind of hunger you have known before, where a meal will satisfy it. This is deeper, a hollowing out that never stops. You can feel it in your bones, in the way your steps grow slower, in the way your mind sometimes drifts into a haze as you work, imagining food you will never taste again. Your body changes quickly in this place. Clothes that once fit begin to hang loose, your skin growing pale and stretched, your cheeks hollow. You see it in the faces around you, all sharp angles and tired eyes, people who move as if their limbs are filled with sand. Illness is constant. A cough, once started, lingers for weeks. Cuts from the work fester without medicine. The camp does not have a doctor in any real sense. If you are too sick to work, you are left in the barracks, but rest is not care. More often than not, those who stop working do not get up again. You begin to understand why so many here speak of death not with fear, but with a kind of quiet acceptance. In whispered conversations, rare and dangerous, you hear that up to 4 in every 10 prisoners will die here, not from direct violence, but from the slow, unrelenting grip of starvation or untreated sickness. Each removal of a body is done in silence, without ceremony. The space they leave behind is quickly filled by another. Death here is not an event. It is a constant presence, as ordinary as the cold or the hunger. Pain in this place is not simply punishment. It is a language. You hear it in the strained breathing of the person beside you as they struggle to lift a stone. You see it in the way some flinch at the sound of approaching boots. Torture is not random here. It is precise, calculated to break the spirit while keeping the body alive enough to continue working. One of the cruelest methods whispered about among prisoners is the pigeon torture, where arms are tied tightly behind the back and then pulled upward until the body is forced into an unnatural curve, muscles tearing, joints screaming. The victim is left hanging, suspended, for hours or even days. When they are finally lowered, they often cannot use their arms at all. There are punishment cells too, spaces so small you cannot stand upright, but too cramped to lie down. You are forced into a crouch for hours, your legs trembling under your weight, your back aching, darkness pressing in until it feels like a second skin. The sounds inside such a cell are your heartbeat and the slow creak of your muscles as they try to hold you up. Sometimes, punishments are public, staged to make a lesson out of someone. Random beatings for imagined infractions are common. A prisoner might be struck for moving too slowly in line, for speaking without permission, or for dropping something they were carrying. The blows come suddenly, without warning, and often from behind, so you cannot brace for them. But perhaps the most chilling spectacles are the executions. They are not hidden away. Instead, they are carried out in front of assembled prisoners, everyone forced to watch. You are lined up in rows, told to keep your eyes forward. The condemned is brought out, sometimes bound, sometimes already weak from injuries, and made to kneel or stand in a designated spot. Then comes the hanging, the quick, sharp crack of rifle fire, or, in the most archaic and horrifying cases, beheading. These moments are designed to etch themselves into your mind, to make defiance an unthinkable choice. In some cases, if an escapee is captured before execution, the prisoners themselves are forced to take part. Stones are handed out, and you are told to throw them until the guard says stop. Refusal is not an option. Your hands tremble as you grip the stone, the weight of it far heavier than the rock itself. Each throw feels like chipping away at whatever humanity you have left. Even children in the camp are brought to watch, their young faces absorbing images that will stay with them forever. Here, death is not just an end, it is theater, a performance meant to keep fear alive long after the final breath has been taken. As the days pass, you begin to notice the guards more closely. Their faces are often impassive, but there is something in their eyes, not cruelty exactly, but a hollow absence where empathy should be. You hear stories from those who have managed to leave that guards are trained from the start to see prisoners, not as people, but as something less. They are told you are dangerous, corrupt, and undeserving of kindness. This makes the violence they inflict easier, more routine. Starvation, forced labor, even death. These are reframed as necessary acts for the good of the state. But sometimes you catch a flicker of doubt in a guard's face, a hesitation in their step. You wonder if they, too, are prisoners in their way, bound by an ideology that leaves no room for compassion. In rare moments, when their attention is elsewhere, you allow yourself to think of life before the camp, though the memories feel as if they belong to someone else. You see faces you may never see again, hear voices that might already be silent. And in that private space inside your mind, the only place left that is truly yours, you promise yourself to remember. Because here in the camp, forgetting is another way of dying God. There are days in the camp when the weather itself feels like another guard. In summer, the air grows thick and oppressive, heavy with the smell of sweat, rot, and waste that never fully washes away. Flies gather on every surface, crawling across food, faces, and wounds without fear of being swatted. In winter, the cold becomes a living thing, sliding under clothing and settling deep in the marrow. It makes tools burn to the touch and stiffens your hands until they can no longer grip. Snow drifts against the fences, turning the camp into a kind of white tomb. And yet, work never stops. In winter, you are sent to break ice from frozen ground, your breath hanging in the air like thin smoke. In summer, you are made to toil under a sun so fierce it blisters skin within hours. Heat or cold, hunger or sickness, none of these are considered reasons to slow down. The work is varied only in the sense that the tasks change, but the weight never lifts. One day, you may be sent to carry stones from one end of the camp to the other, a task that seems designed more to exhaust than to build anything. Another day, why you might be ordered to fell trees with tools, so blunt they tear at the wood instead of cutting it. Sometimes the labor is farming, planting or harvesting crops, but here the fields are not for the prisoners. The best of the harvest goes elsewhere, to feed the army or the elite. What scraps remain are left for the camp kitchens, where they are boiled down into thin soups that do little more than warm the stomach for a moment. Before hunger settles back in, guards watch constantly, pacing along the work lines, their eyes sharp for any sign of lagging. They carry batons, sticks, sometimes whips, and their hands are quick to use them. You learn to move in a way that looks steady, even when your legs are shaking. You learn to keep your eyes on the ground, to avoid any gesture that might be read as resistance. Over time, you notice how the body adapts in ways you never imagined. Your shoulders ache at night, but in the morning, you find you can lift heavier loads. Your feet blister and bleed, but soon the skin hardens into calluses. Yet no adaptation is enough to erase the constant undercurrent of exhaustion. It's not the tiredness of a long day's work followed by rest. It's a tiredness that carries over into every day, piling up like the stones you move, until you are unsure if you will ever feel whole again. Among the prisoners, there is a silent network of small kindnesses, a shared glance, a crust of bread slipped into another's hand, a whispered warning when a guard is near. These gestures are dangerous. If caught, both giver and receiver will be punished. But they are also essential, because in a place designed to strip away humanity, small acts of compassion become an act of rebellion. You begin to recognize faces in the work lines, people who seem to move with a little more strength, or who manage to carry an expression that hasn't yet been emptied of all feeling. They become landmarks in the blur of days, proof that not everyone has been broken. Yet the system's design is clever. It does not simply rely on guards to enforce its rules. It plants seeds of distrust between prisoners. Rumors spread of someone who informed on a fellow inmate to get lighter work, of another who overheard a forbidden conversation and repeated it to a guard. Sometimes these rumors are true. Sometimes they are manufactured to keep suspicion alive. Either way, the result is the same. You are never entirely sure who might turn on you. The fear of betrayal becomes another invisible fence, keeping you from reaching too far toward another person. At night, back in the barracks, the air is thick with the sound of coughing, restless shifting, and the occasional muffled sob. There is no privacy, no moment where you can be alone with your thoughts without the press of other bodies nearby. If you turn over in your sleep, you are likely to bump into someone. The boards beneath you creak loudly enough to wake the person next to you. And even here, the guards sometimes enter without warning, checking for anything they deem suspicious. A hidden scrap of food, a piece of cloth torn for warmth, a whispered word they decide is dangerous. Punishment for such discoveries is swift and rarely proportionate. You might find yourself sent to the punishment cell for days, crouched in darkness, your legs trembling until they give way. Or you might be assigned to a special task, the next day, which often means work so harsh it's intended to break you physically and mentally. One of the most harrowing realities of the camp is that families are often held together here, but not in the way you might think. Parents, children, and siblings may be placed in the same facility, yet rarely allowed to see one another. You may know that your mother is somewhere beyond the fence, working in a different section, or that your child is in a barrack not far away, but the system keeps you apart. When glimpses happen, a passing in the yard, a fleeting view across the field, they are brief and dangerous. Meeting eyes for too long can draw punishment, even if no words are exchanged. The cruelty lies in the knowledge that they are close enough to touch, yet kept beyond reach by invisible walls of rules and fear. Over time, you hear fragments of stories from older prisoners. Some have been here for decades, sentenced in their youth and now stooped with age. They speak of the early years of the camp, when conditions were somehow even harsher, when food was scarcer still, when beatings were more frequent, when there were fewer barracks and more open pits. They tell of winters when dozens froze to death in a single night, of summers when disease spread through the camp in weeks. These are not told as cautionary tales. They are simply part of the shared history, a reminder that survival here is as much about luck as endurance. In this place, time loses meaning. Days are measured not by the calendar, but by the rhythm of labor and the length of darkness. Seasons blur. You feel years passing in your body, but the camp itself seems unchanged. Buildings sag a little more. Fences rust a little deeper, but the routines remain fixed. The same commands are shouted in the same tones, the same punishments delivered in the same ways. You begin to wonder if the camp existed before you were born, and if it will still exist long after you are gone, swallowing lives in the same quiet, relentless way. And deep down, in the part of your mind that still dares to hope, you know that this is the design, to make you believe the camp is eternal, and that your life is only a brief interruption in its endless existence. It is only after many weeks that you start to understand the camp's rhythm, not because it becomes easier, but because repetition wears patterns into your mind. The day begins before light, The barracks shaking as boots stomp past and voices bark orders that leave no space for hesitation. The air outside at this hour is colder than the air inside, and for a moment you almost miss the stale warmth of the crowded sleeping platform. Almost. Lines form quickly in the yard, each person standing with head lowered, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on a point somewhere near the ground. The guards walk the line slowly, their eyes moving over each prisoner, stopping on anyone whose posture is not exactly as expected. Once everyone is accounted for, the work assignments are shouted. Some will go to the fields, others to the quarry, others to carry supplies from one side of the camp to the other. There is no pattern to who is sent where, and no explanation is given. You learn quickly that questioning any decision is pointless and dangerous. Today, your group is sent to the quarry. The path there winds through the camp, past fences, crowned with rusting barbed wire, and watchtowers with small figures inside, rifles resting casually, but always pointed toward the ground where the prisoners move. At the quarry, the work is both simple and exhausting. Break the stone, carry the stone, repeat. The tools are old and worn, the handles splintered, the metal dull from years of use without proper sharpening. Each strike sends vibrations up your arms, rattling your teeth. The dust rises in pale clouds, coating your skin, your clothes, your lungs. Breathing becomes another form of labor. There is no pause for water unless the guards decide there will be, and when they do, the water is warm and tastes faintly of metal. The hours, marked only by the changing angle of the pale light and the way shadows grow longer. Somewhere in the middle of the day, a signal is given for the midday ration, if it can be called that. You line up with the others, hands outstretched, to receive a ladle of watery soup or a scrap of bread no bigger than your palm. The soup is thin, sometimes with a few strands of vegetable or a fragment of something unidentifiable floating in it. The bread is stale and often spotted with mold, but you eat it anyway, because there is no other option. Hunger makes every bite disappear too quickly, leaving you hungrier than before. The afternoon brings more of the same work, your muscles, sore from the morning, yet still pushed beyond their limits. The guards keep moving among the workers, their shadows falling across the ground like warnings. If someone slows, a voice snaps out, followed by the sharp sound of a stick hitting flesh. You keep your pace steady, your breathing even, your eyes down. By the time the day's work ends, the sun has set and the cold is returning. The walk back to the barracks is slow, not because anyone dares to lag, but because exhaustion has made every movement heavier. Back inside, the smell greets you before the door is fully closed. Sweat, damp wood, the lingering sourness of unwashed bodies in close quarters. There is no real light, only a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting shadows that seem to lean in from the corners. You drop onto the wooden platform that serves as your bed, feeling every bone protest as you shift to find a position that hurts less. Around you, people are coughing, whispering, moving quietly. Conversations, if they happen, are in murmurs so soft they are barely louder than breathing. You hear bits of stories. Someone remembers the taste of food from their village. Someone else talks about a child they haven't seen in years. These words are not for comfort. They are for survival. Speaking them aloud, even to yourself, reminds you that you are still a person, that you have a life beyond the fences. But there is always the risk that a guard might hear, or that someone in the barracks might repeat your words in exchange for a favor or relief from punishment. This fear shapes every interaction, making you weigh each sentence before you speak. Sometimes deciding silence is safer. The nights are long. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by the sounds of others shifting or the sudden opening of the door. When guards decide to check the room, sometimes they enter without a word, walking slowly between the sleeping bodies, their boots scraping against the boards. Other times they speak, asking questions that have no safe answers, their eyes moving quickly over faces lit in the dim light. If they decide someone needs to be removed, they are taken without explanation, and the space they leave behind is quickly filled by another. Over time, you learn to read the signs, the way a guard's expression changes before they call someone's name, the particular tension in the room just before the door opens at night. You also learn that these signs offer no real protection. When they decide it is your turn, there is nothing you can do to stop it. Some nights, punishment happens inside the barracks. A prisoner might be made to stand in the corner for hours, or forced to kneel on the floor with hands raised until they collapse. Others are dragged outside into the cold, kept there until morning. The sound of shivering bodies and chattering teeth carries through the walls. A camp is not only a place of physical labor and hunger, it is a place designed to keep you always on the edge of fear. This fear is not loud. It is quiet and steady, like water wearing away stone. It works into your thoughts, your movements, your posture. You start to catch yourself checking over your shoulder, even when no one is there, lowering your voice even when speaking to yourself, keeping your hands in sight as if to prove you are doing nothing wrong. These habits do not feel forced after a while. They feel natural, which is perhaps the most dangerous part. When the morning comes again, and it always comes too soon, the cycle begins again as if the previous day never ended. There is no difference between yesterday and today, between today and tomorrow, except perhaps for a little more wear on your body and a little more distance between you and the person you once were. In the stillness before the first order is shouted, lying on the rough boards in the half-dark, you think about that person. You try to remember their face, their voice, the way they carried themselves. You try to hold on to them, because you know the camp's greatest weapon is not the fences, or the guards, or the labor. It is the slow erasing of who you are until you can no longer remember you were ever anything else. Some days in the camp bring a different kind of weight, not from the work itself, but from the tasks that remind you how deeply the system wants to own every part of your mind. It begins before sunrise, when the call to assemble is sharper, the guards' voices clipped in a way that warns something unusual is coming. You shuffle into the yard with the others, the ground frozen hard beneath your thin shoes, the cold seeping upward through your soles. Instead of sending you directly to work, the guards line you up in long rows, back straight, faces forward. A senior officer appears, his coat heavy and well-made, his boots polished enough to catch what little light there is. He announces that today will include a self-criticism session, a phrase that sounds harmless until you see the faces around you. There is no choice in this. Each prisoner will be made to step forward and speak, confessing mistakes, failures, or wrong thoughts, whether real or invented. The rule is that you must criticize yourself harshly enough to satisfy the guards, then denounce another prisoner for some imagined failing. Those chosen for public blame are expected to stand silently and accept it, even if they have done nothing. It is a ritual of humiliation, designed to turn suspicion into a daily habit, to make loyalty to the state more important than loyalty to each other. The session lasts for hours, the cold biting deeper as the line slowly moves. You watch others step forward, their voices flat as they admit to things no one can prove, their eyes avoiding contact with the rest of the group. Sometimes the accusations sting because they are lies, and sometimes because they are truths no one wanted to hear aloud. When it is your turn, you choose your words carefully, speaking just enough to avoid punishment, revealing nothing that could be used against you later. You name another prisoner for something minor, too slow at work, careless in posture, and feel the quiet shame settle in your stomach. It is not enough to think the right things here. You must perform them in a way the guards can see. When the session ends, work begins as if nothing happened. Today, you are sent beyond the main camp fence to cut firewood in the forested edge of the compound. The trees are tall and thin, their bark dark with moisture, the air sharp with the scent of sap and cold earth. Your group moves together under guard, axes and saws handed out with dull blades that make each cut a battle. The work warms your muscles, but sweat quickly chills against your skin. Every so often, a guard shouts at someone to work faster, his voice echoing between the trees. You keep your eyes on the ground, counting each swing, focusing on the rhythm rather than the time. By midday, your arms ache from the repetition, and blisters have formed where the wooden handle rubs against your palms. You know they will split before the day is over, and the sting will become another constant companion. Lunch is the same as always. A thin soup ladled into a metal bowl, steam curling up into the cold air. You eat it standing, the taste gone before you've swallowed. Then the work resumes. In the forest, you catch glimpses of the world beyond the camp. The faint outline of hills in the distance, the sudden flight of a bird startled from a branch. These moments are fleeting, but they remind you that life exists outside these fences, even if it feels impossibly far away. The guards notice your gaze and call you back to the task, their tone carrying the unspoken warning that attention is meant to stay inside the boundaries of labor. As the sun begins to sink, the light through the trees turns gold, then fades to gray. The walk back to the camp is slower now, the group weighted with the day's exhaustion. Inside the barracks, the air feels warmer only because the wind is gone, but the smell is stronger too, a mix of damp clothing, unwashed bodies, and the faint mustiness of wood that has absorbed years of breath and sweat. You sit on the edge of the platform, stretching your hands toward the small metal stove in the corner. Its heat barely reaches beyond the first few feet, but for a moment it feels like luxury. The evening meal is no more generous than lunch, yet you eat it quickly, because hunger leaves no time for savoring. Afterward, the guard came again, calling for a smaller group to follow them. You are not chosen tonight, but you watch the faces of those who are. Some show nothing. Others flicker with the smallest signs of fear before they mask it away. You have learned not to ask where they are taken, because the answers vary. Punishment cell, questioning, special labor, and knowing will not change your fate when your turn comes. In the quiet that follows, you hear soft murmurs of conversation, quickly silenced when a guard passes by outside. Someone hums a tune under their breath, too low to identify, but the sound is quickly swallowed by the rustle of blankets as people lie down. Sleep comes in snatches, broken by the creak of boards, the coughs of those too weak to hide them, the occasional barked order from outside. You dream of open spaces, of walking without being watched, of the sound of water running in, a stream without fences to block it. But the dream always ends the same way, with the snap of a command, and the cold returning like an old enemy. Morning will come again, and with it, the reminder that here, even your thoughts must belong to someone else. Some mornings in the camp start with a kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise, a stillness that presses against your skin, as though the air itself is holding its breath. On those mornings, the guards are slower to bark orders, their boots not yet pounding the frozen ground, and for a brief moment, you almost forget where you are. But the illusion never lasts. The door swings open, light cuts into the barracks, and the command to rise wipes away the softness. You step into the yard, your breath clouding in the cold, the sky above pale and thin. The air smells faintly of smoke from the camp kitchen, though it promises nothing comforting. The guards move along the lines, counting, scanning faces, and noting postures. A single misstep, standing too soon or too late, a glance in the wrong direction, can be enough to bring a sharp reprimand or worse. Today, the work detail takes you to the far edge of the camp, beyond the familiar barracks and watchtowers, to an area where a half-collapsed building leans against the wind. You are told to clear it. The building's walls are soft with rot, the wood crumbling under your hands, the smell of mold and damp earth rising as you pull it apart piece by piece. Splinters catch in your fingers, dust stings your eyes, and every board you carry feels heavier than the last. The guards do not explain why it must be done, and you do not ask. Questions here are like sparks in dry grass. They catch quickly and burn in ways you cannot control. The day stretches into a rhythm of lifting, carrying, stacking, your back bending under the weight until it feels like a permanent curve. The midday break is no real relief. A thin broth ladled into a dented metal bowl, swallowed quickly before. The wind chills it completely. You eat standing, boots sinking slightly into the damp ground, eyes lowered. Around you, the others do the same, the silence between them thick with exhaustion. After the meal, the work resumes, though your muscles are already trembling with fatigue. You begin to notice the way your senses have sharpened here, how you can tell which guard is approaching just from the sound of their footsteps, how you can feel the shift in the air before an order is shouted. Survival has tuned you to these details, small signals that might give you a moment to brace yourself. As the afternoon drags on, the light fades into a dim gold, and the shadows of the fence stretch long across the yard. You carry the last of the boards to a growing pile, your arms shaking, your palms raw. The walk back to the barracks is slow and silent. Inside, the dim bulb flickers, casting brief shadows that move like ghosts along the walls. The evening ration is no better than the midday one, but you eat it without complaint. Hunger leaves no room for pride. Later, the guards return, calling names. This time, yours is among them. You step out into the cold with the others, the barracks door closing behind you with a hollow sound. The path you are led down is unfamiliar, winding between dark buildings and past a stretch of open ground where the frost crunches under your boots. Eventually, you arrive at a small outbuilding with a single light above the door. Inside, the air is warmer, but carries the sharp smell of disinfectant. A scent so rare here feels out of place. You are told to sit. Questions follow. Some about your work that day, some about other prisoners, some that seem to have no purpose at all. The guards' faces are unreadable, their voices flat. You answer carefully, aware that any hesitation or poorly chosen word could be twisted into something dangerous. After what feels like hours, you are sent back to the barracks. No explanation, no reason for being taken in the first place. Back inside, the others glance up briefly as you return, and look away. No one asks what happened. No one ever does. The night passes in fits of uneasy sleep, each sound in the darkness snapping you awake. Once, you hear the distant clang of a gate, followed by muffled voices and the low rumble of an engine. You wonder who was taken out into the night, and if they will return. By morning, the yard will be full again, and the day will begin as though nothing happened. That is the way of the camp. People disappear, and the silence closes over the space. They leave behind. It teaches you to keep your eyes forward, your voice low, and your thoughts locked so tightly inside that even you cannot always find them again. The cold is sharper today, the kind that makes every breath feel like it's scraping the inside of your throat. You wake to the sound of boots pounding outside and the door swinging open, a blast of icy air rushing in before the guards' voices fill the barracks. There's no hesitation. You move because movement is survival. Outside, the frost covers the ground in a thin white crust, crunching underfoot as you line up in the yard. The sky is a pale gray, heavy with clouds that promise more snow. The roll call is slower than usual. each name checked against a list, while the guards watch for any sign of weakness. Once the count is complete, work orders are shouted. Today, your group is sent to dig new drainage trenches along the fence line, a task as monotonous as it is exhausting. The shovels are worn thin, their handles smoothed by years of hands, and each strike into the frozen ground sends a dull ache up your arms. The soil is hard and unyielding, a mix of ice and clay that clings stubbornly to the metal blade. You work in silence, the only sounds the scrape of shovels and the muffled coughs of those nearby. The guards pace along the line, their shadows cutting across the snow, eyes sweeping over you without pause. After hours of digging, your hands are numb, the skin on your knuckles split and raw. The midday meal arrives, if it can be called that. You gather with the others, cupping your hands around the dented bowl as if to hold in the heat. The soup is thin, barely more than hot water with a few floating scraps, but you drink it quickly, letting the warmth spread through you before it fades. There's no lingering. The work begins again, almost immediately. In the afternoon, the snow starts to fall, light at first, then thicker, each flake settling into your hair, your clothes, your lashes. The ground becomes slick, the trench walls crumbling as you try to dig deeper. The guards seem less patient now, barking for more speed, their voices cutting through the quiet snowfall. You focus on the simple rhythm, lift, push, throw, letting it fill your mind so there's no space for anything else. By the time the day ends, your body feels carved from stone, each muscle heavy and slow to respond. The walk back to the barracks is through a haze of falling snow, the world beyond the fence fading into a blur. Inside, the air is thick with dampness as wet clothes steam faintly in the dim light. You peel off your outer layer, feeling the chill cling stubbornly to your skin. The evening ration is the same as always, and you eat it without thought, the act mechanical. Afterward, a strange quiet settles over the room. Some people mend clothes or patch worn boots with scraps, their hands moving with the slow patience of habit. Others sit still, eyes closed, as if trying to hold on to a memory that hasn't yet slipped away. You lie back on the wooden platform, listening to the muffled sounds of the camp outside, the creak of the watchtower, the distant clang of a metal door, the soft murmur of guards speaking where they think no one can hear. No one can hear. Sleep comes slowly, your mind turning over the day in fragments, the cold biting your fingers, the endless digging, the taste of lukewarm soup. Somewhere in the night, the snow stops falling, leaving the world outside silent and still. You don't know if the morning will bring another day of digging, another building to tear down, or something entirely different. What you do know is that whatever it is, it will be done without question, without pause, and without the faintest hope of it meaning anything beyond keeping you alive. Another day morning arrives with a brittle, glassy light that makes every edge in the yard sharper, as though the frost itself has been honed overnight. You wake to the same sound you always do, the door slamming open, boots grinding against frozen dirt, voices commanding without warmth. But there's a subtle difference today. The air outside smells faintly of smoke, not from the thin kitchen fires you know so well, but something heavier, something burned beyond use. You can't see the source from the barracks door, only the faint smudge of dark cloud drifting above the far edge of the camp. The guards move with more urgency, pushing the line to form up faster, their gloved hands gesturing sharply. Once counted, you and a dozen others are separated from the main group, ordered toward a part of the camp you've never worked in before. The ground crunches under your feet, the frost mixed with scattered bits of ash. As you walk, the smell grows stronger, bitter, and metallic, clinging to the back of your throat. The destination is a low, windowless structure surrounded by a fence inside the main fence, a place designed to be unseen. Here, You are given sacks and metal hooks, told to clear waste material from the building's interior. No one explains what that means, but the moment the heavy door opens, the heat rushes out along with a smell that is part wood smoke, part something far more unsettling. Inside, the air is thick and smoky, swirling in dim light that seeps from a single bulb overhead. You work in silence, moving piles of charred debris into sacks, the heat prickling your skin despite the cold outside. The walls are blackened, the floor uneven beneath layers of ash. Each time the door opens to carry a sack out, the light cuts through the haze, revealing more than you wish it would. There are stains here that no amount of smoke can hide. Guards keep close, their eyes darting between you and the others, making sure no one pauses too long. Time is hard to measure in the haze, but eventually the work is done, and you are marched back into the open air. The sky looks almost painfully bright after the dimness inside, the cold wind biting into your skin as if to scrub the smell away, though you know it will linger in your clothes, your hair, your memory. Lunch is late today, a watery porridge, instead of soup, but you eat it quickly, grateful for the heat. The afternoon work is lighter, stacking cut wood near the kitchens, yet every time you bend to lift a piece, you feel the grit of ash in your palms. The guards seem distracted, speaking in low voices, glancing toward the far end of the camp where the dark smoke still curls faintly. Evening comes earlier in winter, shadows deepening before the final meal. The barracks feel almost close, as, though the air has thickened, conversations quieter than usual. No one asks about the work detail. Those who were there do not offer details. In this place, silence is as much a form of survival as food. You lie down early, the platform boards pressing into your back, and let your thoughts drift to winter's other fires, ones lit for warmth, for cooking, for life instead of whatever this was. You imagine being somewhere with no fences, where the air smells of pine and earth instead of ash and damp wood. Sleep takes its time arriving, in slow waves, carrying you through dreams where the snow is clean and no one is watching. But the morning will bring the same sharp voices, the same frozen yard, and the same quiet understanding that here, even a day with lighter work can leave a weight you carry long after the task is done. The next day begins with a silence, so deep that, for a moment, you wonder if the guards have overslept. The usual burst of noise, the sharp commands, the pounding of boots, none of it comes right away. Instead, there's only the faint creak of wood as the wind pushes against the barracks, the muffled breathing of those still curled on the platforms, and the soft rattle of frost loosening from the roof. When the door finally swings open, it does so without the usual slam, and the guards' voices are low, clipped, almost cautious. Outside, the yard feels different, too. Emptier, the air heavy and still. You notice fewer guards on the watchtowers, their silhouettes more spread out, and a set of deep boot prints in the snow leading toward the main gate. There is no explanation, just the usual count and a set of work orders. Your group is sent toward the storage sheds, long, low buildings with metal roofs that glint weakly in the pale winter sun. Inside, the air is bitterly cold, the wooden floorboards stiff with frost. You are told to inventory sacks of grain and barrels of dried fish, a job that would almost seem harmless if not for the ever-present eyes of the guards. You work in pairs, one counting, the other recording numbers in a worn ledger, the pencil barely leaving a mark in the cold air. Each number is called out softly, and each movement is deliberate, because here even a miscount can draw suspicion. Hours pass like this, your breath rising in faint clouds as you move between stacks, the scent of grain faint but persistent. Around midday, the guards break the routine, ordering you outside to unload a cart that has arrived at the far edge of the yard. The cart's contents are hidden under a heavy canvas, but the smell that escapes as it's uncovered is strong. Salted fish, crates of root vegetables, and a few barrels marked with symbols you don't recognize. These are carried inside quickly, the guards urging you to move faster, their eyes flicking toward the gate as if expecting someone to arrive. After the unloading, you are sent back to the ledger work, though now your fingers are numb and your back aches from lifting. Lunch is a small lump of barley bread and a thin slice of salted radish, eaten while standing in the shadow of the shed. There's no time to warm up. The counting resumes immediately, and the sound of numbers being spoken becomes almost hypnotic in its repetition. In the late afternoon, the guards change shifts, the new ones sharper in tone, more prone to pacing the aisles as you work. The sunlight fades, replaced by the dull orange glow of a few bare bulbs strung along the ceiling. When the day's count is finished, you are marched back to the barracks, your shoulders stiff from hours of keeping your head low. Inside, the room is colder than usual, the stove in the corner dark and cold. You pull your blanket tighter around yourself, watching as others do the same, their faces shadowed in the dim light. The evening meal is the same watery broth, but the absence of warmth from the stove makes it harder to swallow. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then again, the sound echoing faintly off the walls. You lie down without speaking, listening to the distant crunch of boots in the snow, the murmur of voices carried on the wind. There is a sense that something is shifting beyond the fences, though no one knows what it is. In the camp, changes rarely bring anything good, but you cannot help wondering. As your eyes grow heavy, you imagine walking past those gates, following the trail of boot prints through the snow, and finding a place where the air does not carry the weight of fear. But here, dreams are fragile things, easily broken by the morning call and the cold light of another day. The morning air cuts sharper than usual, the kind that makes your skin sting before you've even stepped fully into it. The barracks door opens to reveal a pale sky streaked with faint bands of rose and silver, the kind of light that seems too delicate for this place. The guards are quick today, their voices brisk, their pace steady, but without the barked urgency. That sometimes means trouble. After the count, you're assigned to a group headed toward the camp's workshop building's low, drafty structures with narrow windows clouded by frost. Inside, the air is filled with the smell of sawdust and old oil and the faint metallic tang of rusting tools. The task is to repair wooden crates, some broken from rough handling, others simply worn through from time and weather. You work at a long table scarred with deep cuts and burn marks, the wood stained from years of use. The tools are simple. A hammer with a loose head, a handful of bent nails, a saw with teeth dulled from overuse. But you work carefully, because the guards watch for waste as closely as they watch for disobedience. The rhythm of hammering becomes almost steady, the hollow thunk of metal on wood, mixing with the occasional creak of the floorboards as someone shifts their weight. Every so often, a guard passes behind you, the sound of their boots deliberate and slow. At midday, you're given a pause, but no real break, just enough time to drink from a tin cup of lukewarm water before moving to another table where strips of cloth are being cut to line the inside of the crates. The cloth is rough, fraying easily, and the scissors provided are blunt, making each cut a slow effort. The light from the small windows weakens as clouds gather outside, and a faint draft creeps along the floor, numbing your ankles. The afternoon stretches on with more of the same, the tasks repetitive, but strangely absorbing, because each nailed board and each folded piece of cloth is something tangible in a world where so much of what you do vanishes without a trace. By the time the work is called to an end, your fingers ache from gripping the hammer, and your shoulders are tight from leaning over the table. Outside, The sky has deepened to a flat gray, the air carrying the scent of more snow to come. A walk back to the barracks feels longer than usual, your boots heavy with packed frost. Inside, the stove has been lit for the first time in days, and the thin warmth it offers feels almost luxurious. People linger near it, turning their hands toward the heat, letting the feeling seep slowly into their skin. The evening meal is the same as always, but eaten in the faint glow of the firelight. It tastes almost better, though you know it's only the contrast to the cold. Afterward, the barracks fall into a softer kind of quiet, the kind filled with small, unspoken rituals, someone adjusting a woolen blanket, another tucking a bit of bread into a pocket for the next day, someone else smoothing the creases from a folded scrap of paper. You lie down, listening to the muffled sounds outside, the faint clink of tools being put away, the distant creak of a gate. The thought comes unbidden. Somewhere beyond the fences, life continues in ways you can barely imagine. Yet here, tomorrow will look much like today, and the day after much like both. You close your eyes, letting the steady warmth of the stove and the slow rhythm of breathing around you blur the edges of thought, until sleep slips in without warning. Snow has fallen in the night, a fresh layer that hides yesterday's footprints, and makes the camp look almost clean, almost untouched. For a brief moment, stepping outside feels like entering another place, one softened by the quiet weight of winter. But the illusion fades quickly as the cold bites through your clothes, and the familiar voices of the guards pull you back into routine. Today's work detail leads you beyond the inner yard, through a narrow gate in the secondary fence where the snow lies deeper, untouched except for the trail you now make. The task is to cut down a line of small, stunted trees along the edge of a frozen drainage ditch. The saws provided are dull, their handles worn smooth by years of hands, and each pull through the wood is slow, scraping work. The trees are brittle with cold, snapping in uneven breaks that leave splinters sticking up like teeth from the stumps. You work alongside others, each person focused on their trunk, the sound of sawing and cracking wood punctuated by short, sharp breaths in the icy air. Once the trees are felled, the branches must be trimmed and the trunks carried to a pile near the gate. They are heavier than they look, the wood holding pockets of ice inside that make your arms ache with every step. The guards stand at the edge, their coats buttoned high, their gloved hands resting on rifles. They speak little, only occasionally urging someone to move faster. Midday comes with no real pause, only the distribution of a thin ration, a small piece of bread and a handful of boiled potato skins, eaten quickly while standing in the snow. Your fingers are stiff and red, the skin cracked at the knuckles, but the work resumes without question. In the afternoon, the wind picks up, carrying fine grains of snow that sting when they hit your face. The trees grow sparser toward the end of the ditch, replaced by patches of frozen reeds that hiss softly in the wind. By the time the last trunk is added to the pile, your back feels as if it has been hammered into a single rigid piece. The walk back to the barracks is slower, the group strung out along the path like a line of shadows on the white ground. Inside, the air is damp with melting snow as people pull off boots and hang coats near the stove. The warmth is faint, but welcome, and the sound of dripping water from thawing boots creates a steady, almost soothing rhythm. The evening meal is the same thin broth, but hunger makes it vanish quickly. Afterward, some gather near the stove to trade quiet words, or simply to stand in the heat for a few extra moments before lying down. Outside, the snow continues to fall, erasing the day's work as if it had never happened. You lie back on the wooden platform, listening to the wind move around the barracks, its voice hollow and constant. Sleep comes slowly, not because of noise or discomfort, but because in the stillness you find your mind wandering to the thought of what lies beyond the fences under this same snow. Towns, forests, rivers frozen into silence, places you may never see again, but which, in your mind, remain untouched. Waiting. The morning begins not with the usual shout or the slam of the barracks door, but with the slow, uneven thud of boots outside, moving past the wall, pausing, and moving again. You wake to the sound and for a moment lie still, letting your breath form faint clouds in the cold air. When the door finally opens, the light that comes in is dim and pale, the kind that belongs to a sky thick with low clouds. The guards' faces are unreadable as they motion for everyone to line up. Today, you are sent toward the far end of the camp, past the work yards and sheds, to a narrow road that leads away from the main buildings. The snow here is packed down hard, marked with deep grooves from carts and sledges. Your group is ordered to clear it, not by sweeping or shoveling, but by hacking at the ice with iron bars and lifting it in chunks to the roadside. The work is brutal in its simplicity, the bar vibrating through your hands each time it strikes the frozen ground. The sound is sharp and hollow, echoing in the still air, and soon your breath comes fast, mixing with the faint mist rising from the disturbed snow. Now and then, a cart passes, pulled by a pair of thin horses whose ribs show even beneath their winter coats. The drivers do not look at you, their eyes fixed on the road ahead. By midday, your shoulders burn and your palms are sore from gripping the bar. The meal is the same, a heel of bread and a cup of lukewarm water, eaten while standing on the edge of the road, watching the clouds shift slowly above. In the afternoon, the guards split the group, sending half back toward the camp, while you and a few others were kept to move the broken ice farther away, tossing it into the shallow ditch that runs beside the road. The ice cracks into uneven shards as it lands, the sound oddly satisfying despite the ache in your arms. As the day wears on, the light begins to fade earlier than usual, the clouds deepening into a flat, heavy gray. The wind picks up, carrying with it a fine spray of snow that drifts into your hair and lashes. By the time the work is called to an end, the road is clearer, though the cold has worked its way deep into your bones. A walk back to the barracks feels longer in the gathering. Dusk, the camp's lights flickering faintly through the swirling air. Inside, the warmth from the stove is almost gone, the embers low, but even the smallest heat feels like a shield against the day. People move quietly, untying boots, shaking out blankets, preparing for the night. The meal is a thin soup with a few stray grains of barley at the bottom, eaten without conversation. You lie back on the wooden boards, feeling the steady pulse of your sore hands, the weight of your tired muscles, and the dull ache in your back. Outside, the wind continues, its low, steady hum, like a voice speaking in a language you cannot understand. You close your eyes and imagine a road that leads away from here, not into another worksite, but into open land, where no one counts your steps or measures your movements, and where snow is only snow, clean, quiet, and free of command. Day begins with a heavy stillness, the kind that makes you notice every small sound, the slow shifting of someone's weight on the wooden platform, the faint tap of melting frost dripping from the roof, the creak of the door hinges when the guard finally steps in. Outside, the world is pale and flat, the sky a sheet of muted white that blends seamlessly with the snow-covered ground, making the horizon vanish. The air bites harder than usual, and you can feel it in your teeth when you breathe. The assignment today is different. No yard work, no road clearing. Instead, you are led to a narrow, dimly lit building that smells of dust, old paper, and mildew. Inside are rows of shelves stacked with bundles wrapped in rough cloth and tied with fraying string. You are told to sort them by size and weight, moving them to a new set of shelves built against the far wall. No one explains what the bundles contain, and the guards watch closely but say little. Some are light, no heavier than a loaf of bread. Others make your arms strain, their contents shifting with a muffled thud when set down. The air inside is dry and stale, and dust rises in faint clouds with each movement, catching the weak light from the narrow windows. Hours pass in slow repetition. Lift, carry, stack, until the work begins to blur into a single unbroken motion dot at midday. You are given a cup of lukewarm tea, the first warm drink in weeks, and it sends a brief flush through your chest. The taste is faint, almost colorless, but it lingers as you return to the shelves dot in the afternoon. The guards begin marking certain bundles with chalk, a quick slash of white that stands out against the brown cloth. You do not ask why. Questions are rarely worth the risk. The work grows heavier as the day goes on, your arms trembling slightly each time you lift another bundle. The air grows colder as the sun fades, the light thinning to a dull silver. When the task is finally called to an end, your shoulders ache, and your hands are raw from the coarse fabric. Outside, the wind has picked up, blowing fine snow that stings your face. The walk back to the barracks is quiet, each step crunching softly in the frozen ground. Inside, the stove has only embers left, but people still cluster near it, holding out their hands to catch whatever warmth remains. The evening meal is thin soup with a scattering of cabbage leaves. The taste is more water than vegetable. Afterward, the barracks settle into a hush, the air heavy with the slow rhythm of breathing. You lie down, feeling the ache in your arms, and the faint warmth still lingering in your chest from the tea. In the darkness, the thought comes that somewhere beyond the fences, there are rooms filled with light, with shelves holding books or tools or food, and people moving through them, without a guard at their back. You hold the image in your mind until it becomes a kind of dream, one that follows you into sleep, where the shelves are endless and the air is clean, and no one tells you where to place what you carry. The sound of the whistle cuts through thee, cold like a blade, sharper than the wind that sweeps across the yard. It's earlier than usual, and the barracks stir with the slow reluctance of people pulled from sleep before the body is ready. The air inside is cold enough to make breath. Visible, small clouds rising and fading above each bedroll. When the door opens, the light outside is faint and brittle, the kind that comes just before sunrise on a day where the clouds are heavy, but not yet ready to break. The guards' orders are short: form and move. Today's path leads beyond the familiar work sites, through a narrow gate in the outer fence that creaks on its hinges as it opens. Beyond it, the land stretches in rolling fields covered in a thin crust of ice, the kind that cracks underfoot but does not give way. You're led toward a small, squat building made of weathered planks, its roof bowed under the weight of old snow. Inside, the air is damp, smelling of wet rope and decaying straw. Piles of tangled nets are heaped in the corners, their fibers stiff with frost and dirt. The task is to untangle, mend, and coil them. Work that seems simple at first, but soon reveals itself to be endless. The rope bites into your fingers, leaving pale grooves across the skin, and each knot seems tighter than the last, as if it had been tied by a hand determined to make it permanent. The dampness seeps into your sleeves, chilling your arms even though the work keeps your fingers moving. From time to time, you find scraps caught in the nets, bits of wood, old fish bones, the rusted hinge of something long discarded. The guards do not speak much, only pacing the length of the building with slow, deliberate steps. At midday, you are allowed outside for a few minutes to eat. The wind has risen, carrying with it a scatter of fine ice that stings your cheeks. The bread you are given is frozen at the edges, hard enough to make your teeth ache, but you eat it quickly before it can be taken away. Back inside, the work resumes without pause. The afternoon passes in a rhythm of pull, twist, untie, and reknot. The smell of the rope becomes something you can taste at the back of your throat. A damp, briny bitterness that clings, even when you breathe through your mouth. Toward the end of the day, the guards begin inspecting each coil, unspooling it partly to check for missed knots. If they find one, the coil is tossed back with a curt order to fix it. The light through the windows fades to a dull gray, and the sound of the wind outside grows louder, rattling the loose boards in the wall. When the order comes to stop, your hands are raw, the skin rough and scraped in places, and the grooves from the rope still etched deep into your palms. The walk back to the barracks is against the wind, and it feels as if it's pushing you back toward the worksite with every step. Inside, the stove's warmth is weak, but real, and people huddle. Close, shoulders touching, eyes half closed as they take in the heat. The evening meal is thin broth with a few soft grains at the bottom, eaten in near silence. You lie down afterward, pulling the blanket over your head, the smell of the rope still clinging faintly to your skin. In the darkness, you think of the sea, not the one from stories or postcards, but a rough, gray stretch of water under a winter sky, with nets drying on wooden poles, and no one telling you how many knots you must untie before you are allowed to stop. The image drifts with you into sleep, where the rope finally loosens, and your hands are freed. The morning begins under a sky the color of dull steel, with no sign of the sun behind the thick, low clouds. The air feels heavier than usual, as if the cold itself has weight pressing down on your shoulders. When the guards open the door, the smell of smoke drifts in from somewhere beyond the fence, faint but distinct, carrying with it a dryness that seems out of place in the frozen air. The line forms slowly, boots crunching on the thin frost that has settled on the wooden floor. Today's march is longer, the path taking you past the main work sites and into an area where the ground rises in low, uneven mounds covered with patches of frozen grass. You arrive at a cluster of half-collapsed sheds, their roofs sagging under layers of snow, the wood splintered and silvered with age. Inside, the air is stale and thick with the scent of earth, dust, and rotting grain. The task is to clear the sheds, pulling out anything that can be burned, repaired, or repurposed. Old crates are stacked in the corners, their sides swollen and warped by dampness. Some are so soft with decay that they crumble when lifted, releasing a musty smell that clings to your hands and sleeves. Rusted tools lie scattered on the floor, shovels with bent handles, saws with teeth worn to stubs, hammers that have lost their heads. You move them into piles according to the guard's signals, careful not to move too slowly. Now and then, you find something unexpected, a jar of nails still sealed, a folded scrap of paper too faded to read, a broken lantern with glass still clinging to its frame. The work is constant, bending, lifting, dragging, the weight of wet wood making your back strain. By midday, sweat has formed under your layers despite the cold, and the dampness chills you further when you step outside to eat. The bread is dense and heavy, the edges stiff, and you chew it slowly as the wind slides icy fingers down your neck. In the afternoon, the clearing continues, though the piles outside grow taller than the shed walls. The guards begin sorting through them, pulling aside pieces of wood for burning and others for repair work in the camp. As the light fades, you are sent to gather the smallest scraps into baskets and carry them back toward the central yard. The baskets are rough, and the wicker bites into your palms, each trip wearing deeper marks into your skin. By the time the final load is dropped, the sky has turned the color of ash, the first flakes of new snow falling lazily through the still air. The walk back is quiet, the only sound the crunch of boots and the occasional clink of metal shifting in the piles behind you. Inside the barracks, the heat from the stove feels stronger tonight, a brief relief after the damp cold of the sheds. People sit close, rubbing their hands, watching the steam rise from their sleeves as the frost melts away. The evening meal is thicker than usual, with a faint taste of root vegetables, though still far from filling. Afterward, you lie down, the smell of damp wood still in your nose, and your mind drifts to the idea of a shed that is dry, warm, and filled not with rotting grain and broken tools, but with things chosen to be there, things that belong. In that imagined place, no one tells you to take it apart. You simply close the door and let it stand. The day begins with the sound of shovels striking frozen earth, not from inside the camp, but somewhere beyond the fence, a metallic ring traveling through the still air. The guards seem impatient. This morning, their voices sharper, their gestures quicker, urging everyone into line before the weak daylight has even touched the horizon. The cold bites harder than usual, making the skin on your face feel stiff, and each breath is a pale ribbon that disappears almost as soon as it forms. Today's path leads to the farthest corner of the camp's perimeter, where the fence bends sharply toward a cluster of narrow trenches dug into the frozen ground. The snow here is thinner, worn away by wind, revealing patches of dirt as hard as stone. The work is to clear these trenches and deepen them, removing the packed snow and frozen soil with long-handled shovels that are heavy even before they're filled. Each strike of the blade sends a jolt up your arms, and the earth resists with a stubbornness that makes the task feel endless. The wind carries fine grit into your eyes, forcing you to blink constantly as you work. Occasionally, you uncover bits of wood or metal buried in the soil, splinters of old fence posts, the rusted head of a nail, a fragment of wire twisted into a knot. The guards collect these without comment, dropping them into sacks slung over their shoulders. By midday, your gloves are stiff with frozen mud, and your shoulders ache from the constant motion. The meal is eaten standing, boots sinking slightly into the loose dirt at the trench's edge. The bread is dry and crumbles into your hands, and the water has a faint metallic taste from the tin cup. The work after the break is slower, the trench walls now higher than your head, the light from above a narrow strip of pale gray. Your breath echoes faintly in the enclosed space, and the sound of shovels striking earth becomes a steady, unbroken rhythm. As the day wears on, the guard shadows stretch long across the ground, the low sun turning the snow at the edges of the trench a dull gold. When the order comes to stop, the air is already dimming, the cold settling deeper into the ground. Climbing out of the trench is harder than expected, your legs heavy and unsteady from hours of crouching and lifting. The walk back is slower, the group stretched out along the path, each step leaving a shallow imprint in the new dusting of snow. Inside the barracks, the stove gives off a faint heat, and people press close without speaking, eyes half closed as they thaw their hands. The evening meal is a thin soup with a trace of onion, the flavor fading before you can name it. Lying down afterward, you can still feel the trench in your body, the narrow walls, the weight of the shovel, the cold that seemed to rise from the ground itself. In the drifting edge of sleep, you imagine a trench not as a place of labor, but as a shelter lined with warmth, its walls strong against the wind, where the earth gives way easily beneath your hands, and each strike of the shovel uncovers not frozen dirt, but the first signs of spring. The morning air is thick with mist, so dense that even the nearest watchtower is only a faint outline against the pale sky. The sound inside the barracks is muted, as if the fog has seeped indoors and softened every movement, every shuffle of boots and creak of wooden boards. When the door opens, the mist flows in like a slow breath, wrapping around ankles and clinging to the folds of clothing. The guards give no explanation, only motion for the line to form, their outlines blurring as they move ahead. Today's route leads through the outer yard, past the storage sheds and the half-buried fence posts, until the ground slopes toward a shallow, frozen marsh. The reeds here are brittle and pale, snapping underfoot with a dry, hollow sound. The task is to clear the frozen stalks and gather them into bundles for burning. The work begins with gloved hands snapping the reeds close to the ground, the stems breaking with little resistance, but the ice beneath makes footing treacherous. More than once, someone slips, the sharp crack of the reed giving way followed by the dull thud of a body meeting frozen earth. The air smells faintly of stagnant water, a scent made sharper by the cold, and the mist clings to everything, lashes, hair, even the rough wool of the coat. As the piles of reeds grow, the guards move among them, tying each with a loop of twine and tossing them into a cart. Midday brings no sun. The fog only thickens, turning the sky into a low, featureless ceiling. The bread is damp from being carried in pockets, and the tea, barely warm, sends a small wave of heat down your throat before fading entirely. Work in the afternoon grows heavier as the ice begins to melt in patches, the ground turning slick and uneven. The damp seeps into the seams of boots, numbing toes until they feel like blocks of wood. The sound of reeds breaking becomes hypnotic, blending with the soft crunch of steps and the occasional call of a bird somewhere far off in Thar. The mist. Toward the end of the day, the bundles are loaded onto sledges, their weight making the runners sink into the softening ice. The walk back is slower, each step careful to avoid hidden patches of water. Inside the barracks, the air feels warmer, simply because it is still, though the stove's heat is barely enough to dry the edges of soaked boots. The evening meal is little more than warm water with a few floating leaves, but it is swallowed quickly, more for the heat and the taste. Lying down, the scent of reeds still lingers, a dry, papery smell that follows into the half-dreams of night. In those dreams, the marsh is not frozen, but alive with green, the water clear and cool, the reeds swaying gently in a breeze that carries no orders, no shouts, only the sound of wind and the faint hum of summer insects. The day begins not with the sound of boots or shouted orders, but with a hollow, metallic clang that echoes through the compound like the toll of a distant bell. It is a different signal, one you do not hear often, and its unfamiliar rhythm makes the barracks stir with uneasy glances. The air inside is warmer than usual from the lingering heat of last night's fire, but the moment the door opens, the outside cold pushes in, sharp and biting. Frost has crept up the edges of the windows, thin and feathered like frozen ferns, and the boards of the steps crack under the weight of each foot that passes over them. The guards lead the line toward the far side of the camp where a cluster of low, concrete buildings sit half buried in snow. The roofs are flat, their edges rimmed with ice, and the small windows are so clouded they seem painted over. The work today is inside one of these buildings, a space that smells of dust, oil, and the faint, lingering scent of something long burned away. The air is dim and heavy, the only light coming from a few high vents where the fog drifts in, like pale smoke. Along the walls are rows of metal shelves, each holding crates, buckets, and bundles wrapped in cloth. The task is to sort through these supplies, removing what can be used and carrying the rest outside for disposal. The crates are heavy, their sides rough with splinters, and the lids creak when pried open. Inside, you find all manner of things. Rusted bolts, scraps of leather stiff as bark, glass jars with cracked lids, coils of wire tangled into nests. Some objects are unrecognizable, worn into shapes that have no clear purpose anymore. Dust rises with every movement, catching in the throat and clinging to the inside of the nose. The guards stand near the door, watching as piles grow in the corners, separating salvageable items from the ones destined for the fire. By midday, your gloves are lined with grime, your shoulders ache from lifting, and the dim light has made time feel uncertain. The bread you eat in the break is dry enough to crumble between your fingers, and the water has cooled to the point where each swallow feels like a small stone sliding down. In the afternoon, the work shifts to carrying the discarded piles outside. The snow is deep in places, swallowing the lower half of your boots, and the cold makes your breath burn as it leaves your lungs. A shallow pit has been dug beyond the edge of the buildings, its bottom lined with ash from earlier burns. The refuse is thrown in, the sound of wood striking wood, metal clanging, cloth landing with a muffled thud. Occasionally, a gust of wind cuts through the gap between the buildings, carrying with it a fine spray of snow that sticks to the sweat on your skin. As the light fades, the pit grows full, a mound of discarded things silhouetted against the dim sky. The walk back to the barracks feels longer than it is, your steps slowed by the weight of the day's labor, and the cold that has settled deep into your hands and feet. Inside, the warmth feels like something fragile that could vanish if you move too far from it. The evening meal is simple, thin soup with a few strands of cabbage floating like paper in the broth, but it is swallowed in silence, as if words would waste the small comfort it brings. Later, lying down, you can still feel the shape of the crates in your palms, the rough scrape of their edges, the smell of dust and cold metal lingering in your clothes. In the edges of sleep, the concrete building is empty and bright, the shelves lined not with broken remnants, but with clean, useful tools, and no one stands at the door to decide what may stay and what must be thrown away. The sky in the morning is almost white, a blank sheet that gives no hint of where the horizon ends or where the light comes from. The air carries a stillness that feels heavier than wind, as if the cold itself is holding its breath. The door to the barracks opens with a long groan, and the outside world spills in, the faint scent of wood smoke from somewhere far beyond. The fence, the crunch of boots already moving ahead. The guards are quieter today, speaking in short bursts of low words, their eyes flicking toward the watchtowers, as if waiting for a signal. The path leads away from the usual routes, skirting the outer edge of the camp until the fence turns sharply toward a stand of thin birch trees, their white trunks streaked with black scars. Beyond them lies a field littered with uneven mounds and shallow depressions, each half buried under snow. The task is to dig here, not for earth, but for what lies beneath it. The shovels bite into the crust of snow, breaking through to the frozen soil beneath, which resists every push. The rhythm is slow, break, lift, throw, and each motion sends a vibration up your arms. Now and then, the blade strikes something solid, and the snow is brushed away to reveal fragments of wood, a length of chain, or a rusted barrel loop. Some mounds hold nothing but frozen earth, while others give up pieces of stone that once might have been part of walls. The guards collect anything that can be carried, setting it into piles that grow taller as the day goes on. By midday, the clouds have thickened, and a fine snow begins to fall, dusting the worksite in a thin white veil. The bread is eaten quickly, its crust stiff with cold, and the water turns to slush in the bottom of the cup. The afternoon work feels heavier, the snow making each pile of earth slippery, clinging to boots and weighing them down. The wind picks up in small, sharp gusts, cutting through layers of cloth and finding the damp places where sweat has cooled. The air is filled with the sound of shovels striking, the soft thud of snow landing, and the occasional call of a guard moving between groups. Toward evening, the piles of collected objects are loaded onto a sledge, its runners squealing faintly as they slide over frozen ruts. The walk back is slower than the mornings, the sledge dragging heavily behind. Inside the barracks, the warmth feels almost strange after the hours outside, making your skin tingle as it thaws. The stove glows, faintly, the orange light flickering against the walls, and the sound of soup ladled into tin bowls echoes in the low room. The broth is thin, but it carries the faint scent of herbs, a small, surprising comfort. People eat quietly, shoulders hunched, their hands wrapped tightly around the bowls to hold the heat in. Afterward, the barracks sink into the muted quiet. Of evening, the only sounds the rustle of blankets and the slow, even breathing of those already asleep. Lying back, the image of the birch trees lingers, their pale trunks standing in the snow, unmoving, unbroken, and somehow untouched by the day's labor. In the drifting edge of sleep, the mounds in the field are gone, the ground smooth and unmarked, the air carrying only the smell of clean snow and wood smoke from somewhere warm and far away. A place without fences, without orders, where the day begins and ends in the same quiet it holds now.